So again, if you're joining us, welcome to this new program that the Mid-America region is offering this year, a monthly gathering and training for the congregational board members that are serving our congregations here in the Mid-America region. My name is David Pyle, and I am the regional lead for the Mid-America region of our Unitarian Universalist Association. I am a cisgender, light-skinned, white-identified man in my early 50s with brown and quickly going gray hair and blue eyes, and I am wearing a black and white striped shirt, and I am in my home office in Oak Grove, Kentucky. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the privilege of being both the host and the presenter for our program today. If you attended our congregational leaders conversations last year, then the format of our program tonight will be familiar to you. These gatherings will include a didactic learning section generally facilitated by one of our Mid-America staff rather than an outside guest. Tonight we're going to talk about the relationships among and between board members in congregational boards. So thank you and welcome. We are glad that you are here with us this evening. And I will turn it over to my dear colleague, Kiana Dene Perkins. Kiana Dene?
Here we go, y'all. My name's Kiana Dene. It's always both parts, like Marianne, Linda Susan, Glenn Thomas. And I'm one of the congregational consultants for Mid America, and I'm the primary contact for a gathering of our smaller congregations. I am a Black woman. I have on colorful glasses, a colorful headband, and I have locks, long hair flowing out of my headband, and a gray shirt with a peace sign that's rainbow colored on this evening.
Good evening. I'm Lauren Wyeth, and I'm a congregational life consultant and our faith development specialist in the Mid-America region, and I'm the primary contact for most of the region's large congregations. I am a light-skinned white person with curly blondish brown hair. I've got tortoiseshell glasses on. Tonight I'm wearing my favorite color, at least it's my favorite color today, of blue in my shirt, very bright. And I am in my home office in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My pronouns are she or they.
So greetings, everyone. Thank you all for coming back. And there's always a thing about people who come back from a breakout group. You know that they had the choice. They could have gone and done something else. So it's wonderful to have you back with us again. Uh, and as one of the things I wanted to begin, because this is the first time we are doing this program, I wanted to begin really uh, uh, with talking a little bit about what our hopes for this program are going to be over the year. Um, we wanted to find a way to bring some of the UUA's materials and programming on board leader and board leader development into a different way of engaging it with congregational leaders. There are some online ways we're going to share with you near the end, some links to get to the UU Leadership Institute course for new board members. We're going to share the materials, the 12-part series that's in Leader Lab for boards to be able to engage and develop together. But we wanted to do it in a more communal setting. And so the idea of creating this board members gathering once a month is a chance for us to explore a different topic of board leadership each month. And with this month's focus being on the relationships that we all hold together as members of boards. And I say including myself, because I am an ex officio member of the Board of Trustees of the Mid-America region as the regional lead. So the as board members, our relationships are a little different than maybe they are in other parts of the congregation's life or even our relationships as congregational board members are different than the relationships we may have with people on the board of a nonprofit or on the board of an educational body or something, school board or something like that. Each month, we're also going to have a short time. We'll have a short presentation. We'll have a group discussion by congregational size after the presentation, and then a Q&A with the presenter. And the presenter for these will be differing members of the Mid-America regional staff. And most of the materials we're presenting today can be found. We will be able to share out some of these materials. There'll be a recording made that you can refer back to. But most of the materials are also able to be found in the Board Basics course or the Board Foundations courses on UU Leader Lab. And you can also take the UU Institute course titled UU Board Foundations. So I want to start by saying congregational boards are different. Now I can't see everyone because you don't have hands up, but I wonder if you have been part of a board outside of your congregation, like in a nonprofit or even a corporate board, if you could like raise your hand or something or wave for a second. Yeah, that's a common thing for Unitarian Universalists. We often are involved in nonprofits and other leadership roles, and even in corporate world, we can be involved in boards. And I make the case that congregational boards are fundamentally different than many of the other kinds of boards, even in nonprofit boards that we might have served on. I worked as a consultant with the board of a hospice, and it was a not-for-profit hospice. But their board members weren't involved in the daily work of the hospice. The board members were not the nurses and the social workers and the board members were simply people that supported the hospice and were served in that leadership role. But in congregations, we are hopefully deeply involved in the life and the work of our congregations as well as serving as board members. So there is a different level of policy development that exists in congregational boards versus in other institutions. There's a different level of connection. Congregational board members have to do a different way of keeping connection to the stakeholders and to the congregational members than happens in other institutions. And it's also really easy for congregational board members to get confused about which role they are in a particular moment, right? So for example, I might be an owl teacher within the congregation. And when I'm teaching owl, which is a thing I used to love doing when I was in congregational ministry, when I was teaching owl, I'm from that lens. That's the thing I most. But as a board member, I have to keep in mind the whole of the congregation, not just how important the OWL program is to me, right? In thinking through making decisions. And it's also a different relationship. In congregational boards, there is a different relationship with the executive. Now, what the executive is in a nonprofit environment, which I am, in essence, the executive director of the nonprofit that is the Mid America region of the UUA. And so it's clearly, I, as the executive director of the board, and I have a particular relationship. But when the executive director is, in particular, your congregation's minister, then you have a dual relationship with that executive. You both have a fiduciary governance relationship. They're also your spiritual advisor and your pastor. And that role relationship can create confusion for board members. I think I'll often be coaching board members around an issue where maybe they're not in full agreement with their congregation's minister, and it comes up over and over. But I don't want to seem, this is the person that may be doing my loved one's memorial service. This is someone, so there's just a different relationship than you might have with the executive of an institution that's not a congregation. Um, in the fact that they're also your spiritual leader as well as the executive. Now, not all congregations have a minister as the executive of the institution. Not all congregations have ministers. But when some congregations don't have anyone in an executive role, the board plays both of those roles, both the governance role and the executive role. Congregational boards also have covenantal relationships with both the members of the congregation and in many boards with members of each other. Now, covenant, we're going to go deep into that what that word means in a few minutes, but the basic premise is that we are not together in these bodies for a motive of profit. We're not together. We are together because we are a spiritual community. We're a religious community together. And so our relationships are different than they might be on a school board. Um, the relationships amongst us as board members and of us with the members of the congregation are different than they certainly might be in a corporate board or in an academic setting. So, realizing the importance in religious community, we invite people to come and invest their deepest selves, to risk vulnerability, to be real with one another, to trust each other with our deepest values and our hopes and our dreams. And so, because we invite people to that level of relationship within religious communities, we also have a deeper ability to hurt one another, to have conflict that causes harm, not just, if I'm in an argument with someone on the school board that I used to be part of. If I'm in an argument related to that, it doesn't hurt my soul the same way being in a difficult, challenging conflict with a member of the congregation that I am part of, the way that can cause harm to me. So relationship for board members are different. It's also true that in many of our congregations, our minister, who, if especially if they're in an executive role, the minister is also an ex officio board member. And this is different. When I was the district executive for the Joseph Priestley district of the UUA, it was clear I was not an ex officio board member. I was a staff member there to support the board. But in Mid America, I am an ex officio member of the board, and that doesn't mean not really a board member. It means that I'm a full board member by the right of the office that I hold, which makes me sometimes the longer term board member, because a board term might be only 3 years in a particular board, but the executive may be there for much longer than that. So just realize that understanding that the minister, and there are a few congregations where the minister actually has the board executive, the minister with an ex officio board member, actually does have voting rights within that board. I actually don't think that's a wonderful idea, because then people are put into positions where they're on the opposite side of a vote from their spiritual leader. That seems deeply problematic to me. But know that it is a case in some of our congregations. There's also a higher level for congregational board members. There's a higher level of responsibility and accountability to congregational members. That hospice that I talked about, the hospice board and the staff of the hospice saw each other once a year at a fundraiser where everyone received a scripted memorandum of what were safe conversations to talk about at that fundraiser. Um, but you, as members of a congregational board, you are in Sunday morning coffee hour, I hope, on a regular basis, with people coming to talk to you about everything under the sun, and often exactly why they think the congregation isn't doing what it should be doing, and why are you, their board member, not doing something about it, right? So you're just in a different kind of relationship in a congregational board than you might have in other types of board settings, right? Other types of board responsibilities. And that doesn't even bring into it that if you're in a partnered relationship, your partner may also be a member of that congregation and may not agree with you about everything. And that you are then the board member who is getting lobbied by their spouse for something, right? So just does it land that relationships that for congregational board members are just more difficult and complicated? Um, and so we need a little more. Um, I say that the characteristics of an excellent congregational board, the congregational boards that I see that are doing really well, they're differentiated in the sense that they're able to see themselves in the separate roles they fill. They're able to say, at this moment, I'm not the owl teacher. At this moment, I'm the board member. And they're able to help other people in the congregation see that as well. That no, I'm not in this budget conversation to get more money for Owl. Um, I'm in this budget conversation for what's best for us fulfilling the full ministries and mission of our congregation. And they're able to can enter into conflict and disagreement non-personally, and engage issues based upon how they affect the whole congregation, not just those areas that they're most personally connected to. Congregational boards are also visionary, that understand that and can focus on the vision of the congregation, can both discern and help guide what the congregation wants to create in the world, can see and compare possible futures for the congregation that arise from those decisions, and are aware of liberal religion and the community beyond the congregation. They're also empowered. The best congregational boards are the ones that feel that their membership has elected them to represent the best interests of the congregation within the community and and trust them to make those decisions. I will say that there are some congregations that have a different conception that I think the boards sometimes struggle around, which is the idea that you are elected to enact the will of the members, which is very common. But I find the boards that more excel are the ones whose congregations empower them to act in the best interests of the congregation, because you have more information than the majority of the members do. The best ones are also missional in the sense that the board has done deep work to understand not just a mission statement, but understand the purpose of the congregation, understand what the congregation is trying to create in the world. The congregations that are doing this missional work best tell me that what it feels like is that they're part of a small group ministry. Small group. I think most people know what small group ministries are. They're part of a small group ministry. The board is a small group ministry on the future and vitality of Unitarian Universalism in their community. Boards that are having regular conversations together to understand, what does this moment ask of us? What does our goal to create the world that we want to create ask for us in this moment? And I put these slides in here because I wanted to name these last two. I didn't want to give some of the characteristics of the high functioning boards that I get to work with without naming all of them, but these are the two that I put in here. Um, most of the excellent boards that I work with have an understanding that they are functioning as a shared voice, that they are acting together, that they are, when you are in your board role, when you're representing the congregation, you're doing so not as an individual, but as part of the board as a whole. And that sometimes means that you may hold back some of the things that you might personally share. We'll talk about how congregations do this well in a minute. But it is that you're committed to the process of the board and to representing the work of the board together. And they're also covenantal. The boards that have set some agreements based in their commitment to Unitarian Universalism and to our shared liberal values. They've set some commitments about how they're going to be in relationship with one another, how they're going to trust one another, how they're going to maintain and support those shared relationships. And that they're able to admit yourself and name to each other when maybe some behavior is outside of the bounds of the covenant. There are lots of, I will tell you, there's nothing more challenging to a board's behavior than someone who is unable to name that they're not living up to the commitments that they've made within their congregational board covenant. So there was a moment. I was with a congregation in Newark, Delaware, and the board president, we were going through a difficult conflict in the congregation. The board president and I were just talking. She's given me permission to tell this story as long as I don't tell her name. And she just came to me in just a moment and said, David, I used to have friends in this congregation till I joined the board. And I just want to acknowledge how difficult board service can sometimes be. That you say yes to serving on a congregation's board because you care, because you want to support the values. And I believe that congregational board members, not religious professionals like me by ourselves, but congregational board members are the true elected leaders of Unitarian Universalism in the community they serve. not simply someone who is helping to manage a church or a nonprofit or an institution, but you are the leaders of our faith that are elected by the body of our faith for your community. And 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 Unitarian Universalism has an anti-authoritarian streak a mile wide. And this faith tradition loves to react against anyone that it perceives has a relational position of power. And board members are often the subject of that reactivity. And so I just want to acknowledge for a second that it can be difficult to serve in these kinds of, to serve in our faith and our congregations and through board service. I hope that most of you still have friends after having joined the board. Uh, and I hope the board becomes some of those friends because as congregational members, we had some different relationships. Um, as a congregational member that's not a board member, I found when I was a congregational member that I often was really focused on a particular area of the congregation, right? And Al was one for me. Worship committee was another for me when I was a congregational member before going to seminary. Um, my relationship with the minister and staff was often focused around those things or around my personal spiritual needs, right? Around the losses and the griefs that I was struggling with in my own life and my own decisions. Um, or around OWL or around, in my case, being chair of the worship committee. Um, uh, Relationships with the other congregations are often focused around our shared experiences. And the relationship with the UUA was mostly participatory. I would go to GA, I would go to district assembly or regional assembly. As a board member, it changes a bit. Um, we need shift. There's a shift that we need to make mentally as congregational board members to be able to move away from looking at just those things that we are most involved in as members to the whole of the congregation. In the literature and in the trainings, we talk about this as moving away from having your focus being on your dance partners to being able to see the entire dance floor. And that's a mental shift that most congregational board members sometimes struggle to make, um, but it's necessary as a board member. Your relationship with the minister and the staff, it shifts in the congregational system. Um, in that it's more of a collegial leadership relationship in most cases between board members and the minister and staff. And also ministers, I think many then provide a different level of pastoral focus for those that are serving in board leadership, recognizing often how hard it can be to serve in board leadership in our congregations. And there's often a more direct relationship with your UA staff. There is a reason why we have our breakout groups with your primary contacts, because as board members, we have that direct relationship in support of your congregational board. So how do we manage some of these difficult, challenging dynamics of relationships in congregations? Well, the most common one is to develop a board covenant, to more than develop it, to develop it and keep it live within your congregational board. Um, uh, it's as the keepers of the mission, serving as a board member is a form of spiritual leadership, and so it's not just a technical role that you have. It is one that is representing our faith, representing Unitarian Universalism. And so doing that, to do it within the to center the relationships between board members in that covenantal space. I had a seminary professor used to like to talk about covenant in this way. Um, he would say that covenant is the agreements we make between one another about how we are going to share this space and ministry together in light of something larger than ourselves. It's not just because of the relationships, it's because the relationships exist for a reason. A congregational board comes together and exists to support and promote and develop the mission and vision of the congregation. And so it's in light, the covenant is the agreements you make together as a board in light of that mission and vision of the congregation. And, in the congregation I served in Ventura, California, part of our mission was to end homelessness in Ventura, California, to end homelessness in Ventura County. And that part of our mission as a congregation guided board decision making, but it also kept us accountable to the relationships that we had with one another in that board, because it was larger than just ourselves or the relationships between us. There was a purpose. And I think all congregations have some kind of missional purpose. And discerning that is part of the work of the board. We will do a session on mission vision discernment for the boards later in this for boards later in this year. Um, the I don't know what just happened. Hang on. There we go. Um, a board covenant should be about more than behavior. There have been board, covenants that are more right relationship agreements that are, we will do this, we will not do that, we will, the board covenant is about defining the commitments that board members make to each other. So Chanel, I'm wondering if you could put the first of the links that I shared in the chat. I thought about what covenant to share with you all, whether to bring a congregational covenant that I like or something. But since, we're here as the Mid-America region, I thought I would share with you all the covenant of the Mid-America Regional Board. And we won't spend a lot of time looking at it, but I wanted you all to have access to it. This is one that the board looks at on a regular basis. It gets reviewed at every one of our retreats, which our next board retreat is coming up in November, and we will review it again. And it has guided the board through some very difficult circumstances. And, we had a conflict in the board about 5, 6 years ago that resulted in a revision of this covenant at the time. But it has called us back to relationship at times when there have been some difficult and challenging conversations. But more importantly, it frames for us that our work is spiritual leadership, that our service is not to a profit motive, but to fulfilling the mission of all of the congregations of the Mid-America region and the mission of the service of the Mid-America region to all of the congregations that you all represent, that you all serve. So the next one of the relational is a complicated one, and it's a hard one for us to talk about, and that is acting and speaking as one board. One of the things that when I do board trainings like this is often one of the hardest ones for people to grasp, and it is the commitment that you make. It's in many board covenants, but it's the commitment you make that in your board role, you will represent the work of the board as the wholeness of the work of the board. It gets framed in a couple different ways. Sometimes it's called speak with one voice, although I think that there are some challenging parts to the concept of speak with one voice that has been used at times to limit and marginalize the voice of people that have faced historical marginalization in our faith and beyond. But it's more when we are functioning in our board role, to be able to share from the perspective of the whole board. For example, if the Mid-America board were to make a decision and we had done good process and I had been part of those conversations, and maybe the decision that happened wasn't the one that I would have most preferred, that what I represent from that decision in my conversations with congregation members and constituents is the board had a really hard decision with this and came to the best decision that we could come to together, right? Rather than saying something like, well, the board made that decision and I didn't agree with it. But it may be true that I didn't agree with it, but in saying that, what I'm doing is I am discounting some of the board relationship. So that the commitment that we make as board members is to act as board members together, not as individuals. I want to tell a story about a time and with the Joseph Priestley District, where we had a board member of the Joseph Priestley District Board when I was district executive that came to the conclusion they could not support a decision of the board and that they wanted to speak publicly that they could not support that decision. The board had voted 8-1, and they were the one. And what they did was they wrote to the entire board and said, I am going. What they did was they chose to resign from the board and to speak from, and they did share publicly about why they didn't agree with the decision that the Joseph Priestley District Board made, but they did so acknowledging that they had been part of a full process. The process had been robust. They had been heard in that process, and that they had resigned so they could tell their experience of the truth, um, their experience of that time. So we're coming up on the end of our time together. Um, uh, when you cannot speak, as one voice, the idea is to share about the process, to share that it was a valid process, that it was everybody's voice was heard, that we were engaged together. Um, and that the board needs to make some agreements in their covenant about how informal communication happens in the congregation, how board members share about their experience of serving on the board with one another. And there are many different ways, and your primary contact can help you think through what are the ways that the board does its formal communications and what are the ways that board members communicate within the congregation in informal ways, and be in agreement with each other about the ways that you do that. So I wanted to share, and Chanel, if you could put in the chat the last three links. These are just for you to have, and you can save them from the chat. There are some additional board trainings that we're going to highlight throughout this year that are available to you, including the UU Board Foundations course, which is a wonderful online flipped classroom model in the UU Institute for being able to develop some clear foundations as a congregational board member. There is the UU Congregational Board Member Training, which is designed for whole boards to do together. It's 12 sessions or 12 modules of experience that you can work through. And then there is the Strategic UU Board, which is designed for some of our larger uh, uh, not just our larger congregations, but it's designed for congregations where the board wants to focus really clearly on mission and vision and less on the operational work of running the congregation, to let that be staff or other volunteers and focus really on the mission and vision of the congregation. And with that, I want to just say that next month we're going to focus on our topic will be the board's role as fiduciary leaders.
My name is Chelsea Krafka. I am the regional administrator for the Mid-America region, and I am a light-skinned multiracial person with glasses and a red shirt and long brown hair. I have one initial question for David. David, you are a member of the Mid-America Board of Trustees. What are a few ways that the Mid-America Board supports and maintains accountable relationships as a board?
So thank you, Chelsea. So the Mid America Board is an interesting board because we actually all attend different churches, right? We're not all in one congregation. And so, one of the things that we find that we do about, maintaining and the relationships we have is we do some really deep check-in at the beginning of every board meeting. We give a good bit of time, usually 15 to 20 minutes of an hour and a half online board meeting to just share about each other, to share about what's happening in our lives, what's happening in our congregations, and we give even more time together when we come together in an in-person retreat, which we do at least once, sometimes twice a year as a board. And that does a couple things for us. One, it deepens the relationships, but it also lets us understand the greater complexity, so that if one of us is checked in that their work their professional work life is being really difficult right then maybe we can have a different level of accountability if maybe they're struggling with a board assignment or something. There's just a level of us intentionally We also have a covenant that we come back to and we check into about how our relationships are, with the commitments we've made to one another and how we hold those commitments together. So those are two of the primary ways. I also think one of the regular practices, because I think it's fair for me to say that my role as regional lead for Mid America region is really two or possibly three different jobs in some ways, being both the executive director of a nonprofit and a supervisor in the UUA staff and a senior consultant for congregations. And there are times where I'm probably the one that's struggling the most to meet the commitments I've made to the board. And so the other thing I would say is the board is really good at holding me accountable, at holding me to both the accountability. So we have some deep policy as a board about the relationship, defining the relationship and accountability between me and the rest of the board of trustees as regional lead. And having those things written down, I often say that policy, decisions that are not written, expectations that are not written into policy feel personalized. And having that as a policy direction is one way that the board holds me accountable. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you, David. I see in the chat here, Reverend Dr. Matthew Johnson wrote, we had some great questions, and one way to sum some of them up is this: how might the board spend their time in a way that doesn't make super long meetings, super boring meetings, or meetings that folks vent about to their friends, such that the nominating committee struggles to recruit? How to
Oh
make the
my goodness.
time both deep, efficient, and relationship building. There's so much fiduciary and policy to do. It crowds out mission and relationships sometimes.
So if there was a thing that a magic wand that I had that I could wave into the world, it would be to help boards discover how to feel more like covenant groups and less like a technical committee, right? Less like a management committee. And some of the ways we do that, if we'll do a session later this year on how to use a consent agenda. And I know that some congregations already have a consent agenda as part of their process, great, but knowing how to use it well and making the commitments is one way that you take some of those more technical things, um, some of those things that make board service feel sometimes challenging, and move it into a way that the board can review and approve material that doesn't take up a lot of board time. To then free that board time up, one of the practices that I teach when I do some deeper work with congregational boards is called a powerful questions practice, and that is where you spend 30 minutes, the first 30 minutes or so of every board meeting after check-in and after, approving the agenda. You spend 30 minutes at the beginning of every board meeting focusing on the board members answering a question that leads you towards mission and vision discernment that you're going to make no decisions about in that board meeting. One of the most powerful questions I've seen a congregational board engage, and they engaged this question for 3 months straight, three board meetings in a row. Their question was, who would we be if we did not have this building? Now, they didn't have any intent of letting go of their 100-plus-year-old building that they deeply love, but them using that question to think through who really are we as a congregation? How are we? And I will tell you, all the thought process they did, and they then went and took that powerful question out to the committees and everything. It really led them to a deeper understanding of the congregation's purpose, its mission, its drive, and that is what I think where board leaders feel like they are most living that role of being the spiritual leaders of Unitarian Universalism in their communities. Thank you, Matthew, and the pastoral congregational group. Powerful questions is a wonderful way to shift the board dynamic.
I'm not seeing other questions in the chat. However, from our small group, we had a contribution from Norma. And Norma, if I can put you on the spot, you had a really fantastic contribution that I would love for you to share with the rest of the group if you would be so willing.
One of the things we do is a check-in also at all of our meetings, and they sometimes used to run quite lengthily. We've agreed, it's part of our agreements, is that we will keep them more minimal unless somebody needs to have that time.
Yeah.
But we also end all of our meetings with 2 questions. Is there anyone that you would like to give appreciation to, including yourself, for something that occurred during this meeting? And the second one is there anyone to whom you would like to speak about needing to repair something you yourself said or something that bothered you? So repair, resolve, or renew. And that does help at the end to pull that piece back together again.
Yeah. That is wonderful, Norma. And there are lots of ways the boards do. I would classify this as part of a kind of process observation, but with a spiritual twist to it, a way to say, both to ask for that appreciation and to be able to give a space for the board to live the covenantal commitment of naming harms and being able to give a space to resolve harms in the moment when they may have happened. And the some this is the thing that I this kind of connects to the earlier question. Boards that develop practices like this, boards that develop, they don't all have to be the same in every board, but develop a practice that does a couple things. One, it lets you live that covenantal commitment, but it also helps build identity for the board. That knowing that you all have those 2 questions you ask at the end when new board members come on, they also experience that you have those 2 questions. I'm reminded of a board in a Mid-America congregation that has, they say, the congregation's covenant that was written for that congregation many in the 1800s, late 1800s. They say that before every board meeting, and it is it's not just a reminder of that covenant because everyone in the congregation they say that covenant in worship, but it is part of building an identity. It is part of building practice and tradition for that board that the new board members are brought in. And I wonder, Norma, I'll ask you the question in this question and answer session. Do you think that having those 2 questions that you use at the end of every board meeting, do you think that also helps create kind of a ritual for the board members?
Absolutely. We also start with our board covenant that we agree, and it isn't just mechanical. We agree what our mission is as a board to serve the best interests of the congregation. So we go over all of that at the beginning of each meeting to remind ourselves of why we're there. And then the ending is a nice way to pull that back together again.
Yeah.
So
Finding practices like this are really one of the things that helps boards make that shift from, we are here as managers of an institution to we are here as spiritual leaders of our faith tradition. And that culture change, that mindset change. It also lets you, I find the boards that do this kind of thing well also find an easier time at holding to acting as one board together a little bit because they're able to name that the time that we have together in this space is different than the other time. I'm not just here as an individual back at a congregational program again. I am here as a member of this board. And as the board, these are decisions we are making and how we are going to communicate about those decisions together, both in formal communication, like a newsletter article or a letter to the congregation, or informal communication as a board member in coffee hour or talking with the other greeters on Sunday morning or with the OWL teachers preparing, that it helps people to hold their board role in a different way when there is this kind of ritualization. I also think small group covenant process and things like powerful questions can help do this as well. So thank you. Any other
I
questions or
I
reflections?
I asked Norma to share it because what also caught me is it gives you a moment in that situation to reflect on your own behavior and impact and intent.
Yeah.
And you don't have to come clean things up later or have a sidebar conversation. In that moment, you can just kind of self-examine, have I done anything that I want to address right now? And I guess for me, the things David said are super important, but also I feel like that reflective moment of taking care of our side of the street, as we say in some communities, is so important. And it means that we don't have to clean up later. It means we don't have resentment flowing through our board. And sometimes when you're a smaller community, 4 or 5 people on a board, having any resentment or any push and pull can make the process even harder. So I loved Norma's suggestion of doing that work right in the moment while the plane is flying. Let's redirect and get us back on track. So thank you, Norma, for your contribution.
One of the things that Lauren, our colleague Lauren, likes to say is that harms that happen in the group should be addressed in the group. And this is an example of doing that. So thank you.
What it does too for us, it has at least, is it, quite frankly, it allows us to be more vulnerable. If I'm willing to say, I'm disappointed in myself for what I said or how I said that
Yeah.
question. And that means I can be more vulnerable. We can be more together if we are really being honest with one another. So, yeah, I think it's a good practice. And we've experienced it well.
So Chelsea, I think I see another question in the chat from Chuck.
Yep, I would like to ask this question. Chuck says, our board work isn't crowded with policy fiduciary building work, but rather, how does the board get more involved with mission without feeling we are stepping over boundaries with program ministry teams that are working on mission? We don't want to overstep what our social justice committee is doing, for example.
So thank you. That's a great question. And the key way is that the board is the body in the congregation which is able to assess, to look at, to discern mission from the whole. Almost every other body in the congregation, be it a social justice committee or a religious education committee, is looking at the missional priorities, the missional, what the work of the congregation from that particular lens, and appropriately so. And so, boards serve an important role in the congregation by being the one looking at the whole. And I will say that some congregations, I will not say which congregation this was. It was not in Mid America, but I was doing a consultation with a large congregation whose minister was on sabbatical. And I asked, the minister asked me to come to the board meeting while they were on sabbatical, so the minister would feel more comfortable, which was a sign. And I asked the board. I said, well, this decision you're working on here, this question you're working with, what does your mission say? And the board looked at me and said, well, the minister always tells us that. And I think that's a challenge that happens in our congregations, that sometimes our congregations have thought that they were supposed to, our congregational boards have thought that they were supposed to outsource that missional discernment work, whether it's to the social justice committees or to or whether it's to the religious professionals. And I firmly believe that the core work of discerning and exploring the congregation's mission is that of the congregational board, because it's the board that is functioning from the vision of the whole, from looking at the whole of the congregation's purpose. And also, it's the board that is maintaining the congregation's relationships with other congregations, that is maintaining the congregation's relationships with the UUA, that comes to programming of the Mid America region. And so, holding that space of both the linkage of where those relationships come together and the vision of the whole. How to do this? I always recommend beginning with powerful questions. I know I said it earlier and I hate repeating myself in a workshop like this, but picking 30 to 45 minutes of a board meeting and just say at every board meeting, we're going to have one open question that cannot be answered yes or no, that leads us to exploring our deepest values as a congregation. And we're going to make no decisions about in that meeting. Like another good, powerful question that I saw a congregation utilize recently was, if we had unlimited money, what would we do? And that congregation spent a couple months with that question, right? The board having, if we had unlimited money, and the practices of how to do powerful questions will probably engage in a later session, or you can reach out to your primary contact, and I bet your primary contact can help you figure that out too. But That is the best way. There are some other tools for how to do missional work as a board, but the most effective one I've seen is taking 30 to 40 minutes of a board meeting on every board meeting at the beginning of the meeting so that everything else that you have fills in the space that's left, and just engage a big question like that. Thank you, Chuck, for that question.
All right, friends, we are coming up to the top of the hour and our close. So I think that we will need to move into that now. Really appreciate the good conversation we're having. And I want to thank you all for attending this evening. And I want to thank David especially for centering us in our relationships at the beginning of our church year. It's such an important place to start. We'll notify you by email when the recording is posted online. So if there's something that came up this evening that you want to share with other members of your board, we'll make it easy for you to do that. And we hope to see you all back here next month. It will be on October 8th that we gather again and continue to explore how we can better serve our congregations and their missions through our board leadership. In addition to this monthly gathering, we want to make sure that you know about the other opportunities and programs that we're offering this year. They're all listed on our website, and Chanel is going to share a link to those in the chat now. We are really, truly grateful for your service to your congregations and to our larger faith, and it's our honor to support your leadership.